Good morning, everyone. Before we get started, I kind of liked what Annie did last week. And if everybody would just turn around and look at the camera and give a wave to the Zoomers and give them a hearty good morning. Okay. Change the tone a little bit. That's kind of weak. All right. As I ring this bowl, let us relax into this common time and space, realizing that we need to be together. We yearn for connection, the familiar faces of friends, and the sound of shared voices. Good morning to our friends, members, and visitors, both here in the sanctuary and those joining us on Zoom, which we have already welcomed. Our mission is to inspire, inform, and support all who seek spiritual and personal growth and a more equal and just community. I am Jan Sprinkle, worship leader today, joining the Reverend Sue Browning for our service. And we've already done the first one. We have a number of announcements today. First, we have reached a milestone as we gradually reopen from the COVID restrictions. Today, we will begin limited singing, and I will be listening for you. The hymnals have been distributed here in the sanctuary, and those of you on Zoom, of course, are also welcome to join in and sing along. We do ask that in the sanctuary, masks remain on, as we are continuing on a pretty conservative reopening path. The Stewardship Committee is in full swing, and I invite you to check our progress on the chart on the lobby. And the basket remains on the table in the lobby for checks and donations. Donations can also be mailed if you're Zooming, if you get on the church website and push the donate button. And this is a note with gratitude from Jackie, Catherine, Joy, and Peggy. In that same vein, another announcement, a reminder that the Precious Metals fundraiser is scheduled Saturday, March 19th. You can donate your no longer needed or wanted silver, jewelry, gold, and older coins to benefit the church. If you have questions or want to donate, please see Lynn Dollinger or Jerry Edwards. You can also schedule an appointment with an appraiser.
Dave.
Now, finally, as we continue to adjust our COVID protocols per our reopening task force, speakers, Sue and me for today, can go without masks while at the microphone. It enhances audio for the Zoom participants. We will be including speakers at the mic for sharing of joys and concerns, but for now, we do ask that you remain masked. Now let's move on to the chalice lighting. And I have some thoughts from the Reverend Scott Taylor. We come with our doubts, worn out, worn down, wanting once again to trust, to believe that hope is not as fragile as it sometimes seems. That division is not as deep as it sometimes appears. And so we light this flame as an act of faith, a reminder, a declaration, a rekindling of the trust that darkness can't ever shut out the light, that kindness is more powerful than we know, that humility and accountability allow us to change, that together we can most certainly bend the arc of this beautiful universe toward justice. Let us all say, we light this chalice as a symbol of the light within all creation. With this chalice for truth. May the search for truth be with us always. We light the chalice for love. May the love for others be strong in our hearts. Joe is going to play through the first hymn, Morning is Broken. I figure we can't get too much help here. And you can check on page 38 of your hymnal and follow along. After he has gone through once, we'll be singing each verse.
I'm going to ask that we stay seated today for this first hymn because we found in Easton last week the Zoomers lose sight lines. So we'll sing seated for now.
Nicely done.
I actually think that does require applause. It was March 8th, 2020, when you last sang together. Woo! So we transition now. The service has some transitions, and I'm going to be talking a little bit today about Buddhism and breathing deeply and patience. And we're going to do that as we swing the service back and forth a little quickly. I now ask Philip Dutton, and Philip, why don't you just come on up to the pulpit to tell us about an opportunity for an outreach collection that we have right now.
Here. Okay.
May I? Yeah, great. Good morning. I ask you to think back when you were maybe in high school. You ever take a bus trip or a field trip? I remember a couple I took when I was in high school. The Fellowship of Christian Athletes, which I was a member of, did a big trip up to Fayetteville, Arkansas for a weekend. Another time, the Key Club took a trip down to the state conference in Baton Rouge. But those can be special times. Any of you remember one of those? Oh, let me hear you. Where?
UN. We went to the UN.
The UN. All right. Anybody else?
Choir trip.
Choir trips. Yeah.
Washington.
DC. Yeah. Williamsburg. Great. Well, we are the James Taylor Justice Coalition of Sumner Hall, along with Monary's Dreamer Alliance, are working to take a group of people, youth and adults, on a civil rights tour of the South this summer from July the 25th to the 30th. And we'll go to, from here to Birmingham, go to the Civil Rights Institute, the 16th Street Baptist Church. We'll go across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma. We will go up to Montgomery, Alabama, and go to the Legacy Museum and the Museum for Peace and Justice there in Montgomery, where we will take a soil sample that we have collected in memory of James Taylor, who was lynched in our community in 1892. They have a big display of jars of soil down there. We will take ours to Montgomery. And then we'll go stop in Atlanta on the way back and go to the King Center and Martin Luther King Jr.'s tomb and the Ebenezer Baptist Church there. We hope to take as many as 30 students or youth with us on that trip. The trip will be public and you can go too. You are actually the lucky ones. You're the first ones to know about it. We haven't made this public yet. Soon you'll hear about it in the media. But we will be offering the trip to the public, but we want to offer at least 30 scholarships to people who couldn't afford to go otherwise, youth and maybe even some families. That's where Manery's Dream is getting involved. They're going to help us identify the youth who can take this trip. So it's going to be a 5-day trip. That's going to cost us, those scholarships are going to cost us about $34,000. So the trip is, $800-900, something in that range for hotel and transportation. So we need to feed those youth and along the way as well. So we are hoping that you will support that trip. You can do that through the church here and donate to the, how are the details going to work? I don't know
We'll put them out in the newsletter, but basically you can put a check here
To the
donate
church.
button. We have different ways to do the outreach, but this
Great.
is counting as an outreach collection.
Great, that's wonderful. And if you know anyone else who's interested and might want to help out, you can we'll have a button on the Sumner Hall website where you can go there and donate specifically for this trip. It's exciting. I hope maybe some of you can even join. If you've never been to those sites, it is a powerful experience to go and walk up the steps of the 16th Street Baptist Church and remember the bombing there that killed 4 little girls, and to go across the Selma Bridge. It's a powerful experience, and we think it can be life-changing for young people. So I hope you'll support it, and if you have any questions, call me. Okay.
As just one additional plug, I think I preached on it would have been late last May, but my husband and I did pretty much that whole trip. Philip had given us the guidelines, and every time you hear it then mentioned on the radio, your heart sees things differently. Philip and I did a service on the lynchings on the Eastern Shore last April with Paul Chu, and we did some interviews. So the congregation has done the work that goes behind this, and just imagine if you could generously support this. I think it's what we're all aching to do, to make a difference in our communities. It has been a challenging week in the news, my friends. I know each of your lives has had its ebbs and flows. I'm hoping there's joy out there, places that you've gotten and heard special good news. I'm hoping that there are places that you have been touched this week. I think our shared experience, I'm looking to Jen, I'm on the centering prayer now, so let's just make sure I'm the same thing. Our centering experience has been around Ukraine, and it's also taken us to broader thoughts about war, about violence. So I invite us now to hear these words from one of my colleagues, Jen Grayson. Spirit of life, spirit of love, our hearts are aching today as we watch with fear and terror all that is being afflicted on Ukraine. We pray from afar, seeing people flee in fear. We see praying in the streets. We see many gripped by uncertainty. And that echoes in our hearts. We pray for the parents who are protecting their children. We ache for children as forces outside of their control shatter their world. We ache for those doing what we can, for those nations grappling with hard truths, trying to better understand what it means to be partners. We pray for those who cannot flee. May the world not turn its face away from this pain. Even in these moments when we as individuals must rest our spirits, may our thoughts and prayers turn to actions that end war and end the threat of war forever and everywhere. Let's just take a moment before we start acknowledgements of the heart and reflect on this experience we have as witness and as caring people who want it all to stop. In the many ways we lift our hearts together. Blessings.
For the acknowledgements of the heart, as before, those of you in the sanctuary can walk up here and talk into the microphone and do your sharing that way. Those of you on Zoom can activate the little raise hand button, I hope, and our technicians will connect you and we will be able to get that information. First, though, as we regularly share, I will light a candle for all the COVID victims, families, the frontline workers, as well as those in our congregation facing illness, recovery from surgeries or accidents. We'll also light a candle for those in Ukraine and surrounding areas affected by the Russian invasion. The horrible challenge of this man-made travesty, especially after enduring the pandemic, must be almost unbearable.
I think we could probably let people on Zoom.
How many?
Am I going to be going on?
No,
Turn your sound off for a second, just.
Go ahead.
I have a particular child and his family to commend to you today. His mother is a colleague of my daughter's and was forced to give birth in a subway station in Kyiv.
Do we have any Zoom sharings? Blessed be. And I've neglected to introduce, although I don't think an introduction is necessary, Joe Holt at the keyboard today. And Joe, this is your chance.
perfect selection. Make sure I got all my piece parts here. So many here are familiar with Thich Nhat Hanh. Thich Nhat Hanh is a Buddhist monk, or was a Buddhist monk from Vietnam, and he is credited with teaching many in the West about Buddhist principles and practices, particularly mindfulness. And he just died this past January at 95 after an incredible lifespan of teaching and modeling mindfulness and doing more than that. It was back in 1975 that he wrote a primer. He finally said, oh, you know, he had been a monk by then for close to 50 years, and he found that people wanted to know what he was teaching. So he put it in a primer, and it was actually for social workers to help them do a better job with their clients, finding a grounded center, sort of a spiritual place to be. It was really interesting. It was actually published, a lot of the copies, by the Unitarian Universalist Beacon Press group. So what I want to start with is a reading. Toward the end of the book is a section that was written by one of his close friends, a guy named Jim Forrest. And Jim Forrest, he had met through doing peace work. He was part of the Catholic peace charity work that was there. And Thich Nhat Hanh and Jim Forrest, a Westerner, became very close. At the end of the book, Forrest writes this section. He's talking here about Thich Nhat Hanh. He had been talking in an auditorium, so we've got a scenario of a wealthy Christian church in the St. Louis suburbs. And one more context, this is 1968. So he'd been talking in the auditorium of a wealthy Christian church in the St. Louis suburbs in 1968. And as always, Thich Nhat Hanh emphasized the need for Americans to stop bombing and killing in his country. There had been some question and answers when a large man stood up and spoke with a searing scorn of the supposed compassion of this Mr. Hanh. He looked at him and he says, if you care so much about your people, Mr. Hanh, why are you here? If you care so much about the people who are wounded, why don't you spend your time with them? Well, the man finished, and I looked back at Nhat Hanh in bewilderment. What could he or anyone say? The spirit of war had suddenly filled the room, and it seemed hard to breathe. There was silence. Then Thich Nhat Hanh began to speak, quietly, with a deep calm, indeed a sense of personal caring for the man who had just damned him. The words seemed like rain falling on fire. Nhat Hanh said, if you want the tree to grow, it won't help to water the leaves. You have to water the roots. Many of the roots of war are here in your country to help the people who are to be bombed, to try and protect them from this suffering. I have to come here. That's what happened in public. I also want you to hear this part of the story, because Forrest continues and shares this. But after his response, Thich Nhat Hanh whispered something to the chairman and walked quickly from the room. Sensing something was wrong, I followed him out. Forrest describes, we were on a cold sidewalk. He was struggling for air, like someone who had been deeply underwater and who had barely managed to swim to the surface before gasping for breath. It was several minutes before I dared ask him how or what had happened. Nhat Hanh explained that the man's comments had been terribly upsetting. He had wanted to respond in anger, so he made himself breathe deeply and very slowly in order to find a way to respond with calm and understanding. But his breathing had been too slow and too deep. Forrest remembers saying to him, well, why not be just angry with him? Even pacifists have the right to be angry. Thich Nhat Hanh responded, if I were just myself, yes, but I am here to speak for the Vietnamese peasants. I have to show them what we can be at our best. Just a powerful story. Thich Nhat Hanh responded in those moments effectively at so many levels. He saw the angry man with compassion. He shared the power. He shared truth to power of those in the rooms. He kept his cool. Without a doubt, he was angry. And yet he found the humanity in the other. And he stayed true to his mission of representing the peasants well. Was he patient? As you hear that story, do you think that he was patient in that interchange? I think we think of that and we think of how deeply he breathed in and what showed on the outside. He offered a peaceful response, a practiced response. He had worked really hard on being able to do that for years. And he shook him, and yet it shook him to his core. So Buddhism, I am by no means an expert on Buddhism. I know we have folks here that have gone to way more sessions than I have. But as I understand it, it's a religion and it's a practice about staying present to the moment and noticing what is around you. It's not something you can read in a book once and 30 years go back to. It's about the practice of doing that over and over. It's about using breath to accept circumstances without judging the circumstances, but saying, this is what is happening in this moment. Not that it's good or bad, but to be present. As part of mindfulness, and he was teaching mindfulness, which to me has a huge overlap with patience, you feel discomfort and anger, and then you let it be. When rushed, patience asks us to slow down. I think Buddhism is a faith that literally is wrapped around patience. And I keep thinking of that external calm, the people who look patient, the monk or the chaplain. And I think I've always assumed to do that external well, those people inside, because I'm not always one of them, are totally calm and relaxed inside. I think we know from the story, often there's a mismatch. So are you pretty much a patient person? I ask the question in 2 layers here. You don't have to raise hands, but you can sort of do a virtual raise. Are you an externally patient person? Sort of cool and reserved, a bit unflappable. How do you do internally? When you're confronted with hardships or delays, is it a poker face outside and churn inside? What is it that patience is for you? I know as a child, every time I was asked to pray, and I was raised in a bunch of different churches, mostly Episcopal, they'd say, pray for something you really want. And I would want to be more patient. I'm not sure what that was, but I knew I should be more of it. We see in this example that Thich Nhat Hanh, this guy who's world renowned for this patient demeanor, is calm. When are you the most patient in trying times? When is your best self? Just take a moment and think, when is your best patient model? It's interesting that Diane described that time today with her grandson. I think I was surprised when I had children, particularly I had my first guy, that I actually had the ability to be patient when they played, or when you'd take a 45-minute walk and you'd gone about a quarter mile. I think I was patient, truly patient, internally and externally, because the stakes felt high. I wanted my child to be that centered person. I also brag a bit that I'm very patient in traffic. How many folks here are patient in traffic? Yeah, it's interesting. About a third. I think for me in traffic, I check one alternate route, and I'm patient because it's something I can't do anything about. But I do remember one time when I was thinking I was so patient about my son, and I was in a meeting at work, And I watched one of my peers bring up the same issue to the boss 4 times in a row. The boss is saying, no, not now, no. I think I stayed, I didn't say anything. So externally I was patient, but there's those times when you're just going, move on with it. Time is money, let's get going. That sense of being hard to be patient. I don't know what examples are going on for you, but I think it's something we all struggle with in different times. All of the world's traditions in some way, and again, not being the expert, struggle and they give us instructions on patience. And patience can be looked at from a couple different angles. In one of the resources I looked at, in the Hindu tradition, patience is an image of you're trying to address trying conditions. You're under some sort of stress and ordeal, and you manage to stay cheerful, to deal with the ambiguity, the not knowing, and not want to seek revenge and not erupt or be angry. I was caught by that word cheerful, patience and cheerful. What is it that triggers us in those moments? Rabbi Jacob Straub explains that the Hebrew word for patience is sablunat. It's the virtue to bear or suffer something unpleasant or painful without increasing other suffering. So it's relational to both who you are with, your connection with the holy. In the Quran, there's a statement, and to be patient, surely Allah is with you who are patient. That's an indication of trusting that God will come up with you, that sense of sometimes surrendering to what we can't change. And in Christianity, we're in the season of Lent. It's a time of reflection, of really bringing out our patient best. Christianity calls for us to be patient with one another, to be patient with God, and to be patient with the imperfect parts of life, and patient in the waiting. Lots of ways we can hear how the religious traditions address patience as an attribute. It's something to strive for, to be at both that inner and external calm, and to be at a place of respect. It's a place sometimes where I think we think we should avoid conflict. We sometimes go because patience, and I think this is where I was as a kid. I wanted to go and I wanted to be patient because I thought I'd be less anxious. My anxiety would be low. We sometimes sing the hymn in the UU hymnal, may I be filled with loving kindness, may you be filled, may we be filled. They found that being patient makes you healthier. You're more centered, you accomplish more. So as we've been through 2 years of churn, I think our patience has been tested. We've had mixed information, we've had confusion and change. And now we're trying to figure out how you leave a pandemic. I think this is actually going to test our thing. When do we drop our masks? When don't we drop our masks? How do we judge others who are doing that? Folks, leaving and finding a different path through the pandemic will be part of the work. What I did learn about patience in all of these traditions is you need to practice patience. You can call it a spiritual practice, whatever, but it's not something that you can pull off the shelf when convenient. This deep breathing, these places you go to a quieter place to center yourself in a time of stress is something that takes practice, whatever that is for you. Could be your walk in the woods during the day, your cup of tea in the morning, whatever it is, it's that centering time. But I also want to raise patience. So we've got it up here on some sort of a pedestal that at least I knew about years and years ago. But when does patience also raise sort of a caution flag? Because Thich Nhat Hanh was focused on peace. He's considered the father of something called engaged Buddhism. And it's when folks take the ethics of Buddhism, but then apply them in the world to causes of peace and justice and environmental matters. It's not a quiet, go off in solitude Buddhist practice, though that may be part of it, but it's also an engagement with the world. Thich Nhat Hanh used his calm-centered voice to protest war, and he traveled worldwide to spread that message. And he acted with urgency in the sense of knowing that time mattered. And in this way, I don't know if he was a patient man. Can you be both urgent? Can you feel a drive to be doing more and more? And he kept up speaking schedules and teaching schedules and public relations schedules that were absolutely incredible back in the 1960s because time mattered. He pressed hard for peace, knowing that many were suffering. And peace, one of the ways to think about peace is peace can be a combination of patience and wisdom. So here he was pressing, knowing how many were suffering. He's credited for helping Martin Luther King change and become more vocal in his stance during the war. In fact, he nominated Martin Luther King for the Nobel Peace Prize. And it hurt. Martin Luther King had to make choices relative to civil rights. When Representative John Lewis, I think we all know Representative John Lewis, died in 2020. And one of the folks who spoke and wrote in The Atlantic about Representative Lewis was Ibram Kendi. And we've read Ibram Kendi together, How to Be an Anti-Racist. The article he titled in The Atlantic was "Patience is a Dirty Word." The title actually came from a speech that Lewis had written in 1963. He was only 23 years old, and he saw patience, lots of Christian roots, but patience was the problem. Folks made Lewis take that line, that patience is a dirty word, out of his speech. He was only 23 and people did that. But here's what he did end up saying. To those who have said, be patient and wait, we have long said we cannot be patient. We do not want our freedom gradually, but we want to be free now. In the article, Kendi goes on, will anti-racists again be told to be patient and wait because there's always something else to wait for? Wait until after Donald Trump is defeated in November. Wait till the Democrats win the Senate in 2022. Wait until Joe Biden's second term. Wait until her presidency. Wait, be patient. Change takes time. Change is gradual. To be an anti-racist is to believe the word now. Patience is a dirty word to those incarcerated by inequity. Patience is a nasty word to those with injustice kneeling on their neck. Patience as that attribute, caution about patience. I'm watching as we go through this work on the Ukraine. Sermons in my car, I'm driving over here, listening to the radio, going on. What I'm hoping for is that Thich Nhat Hanh kind of wisdom that we might see from our leaders. And I think we're seeing some of it, where the emotion of a moment is not going to carry good policy. There needs to be an urgency about finding peace, but not an urgency that doesn't take in wisdom and consider the ramifications if something were to ramp up. It is hard to watch, to feel helpless, to not want to be angry and to not want to get to a revenge and put bad leaders in check. And yet, as we go through urgent times, I think patience serves us well. It serves us well in grocery lines when there are a few checkers. It serves us well when the bridge is clogged up. It's going to serve us well, I hope, as leaders take time to make good decisions in a timely fashion. Because I think it's when we get to this center of patience, that we can choose, that we can be centered enough to make the next rational decision. That doesn't mean that all decisions need to be slow, but they need to be centered. Thich Nhat Hanh offers these words: the way to look deeply is to stop whatever we're doing and truly concentrate on what we are observing. Meditation is not to avoid problems or to run away from difficulties. We have to have enough strength to deal with problems effectively. To do this, we must be calm, fresh, and solid. This is why we need to practice the art of stopping. When you hear that word practice, we need to be in this habit. We need to stop to be calmer and be clearer. Sitting and following our breathing, even for a few moments, is good. It's good in our personal lives. It's good in our reflections on the world. When we stop, we bring our body and mind together. That's what the breathing is about. To stop what you are doing and quiet your restless thinking. You will naturally become more solid and concentrated, and you will see more clearly. I'm not sure what the next weeks, months, or years will bring. None of us know. But I think these lessons from Thich Nhat Hanh, this sense of being centered, but not being afraid to be urgent and proactive, is something that will matter. Because that's when we are available to love and care for ourselves and others, and to be good citizens in the world. May it be so, and blessed be. We now have music that has been chosen intentionally for this moment. And I think we will try to stand here as Jan announces our hymn now, and a little bit about why he and Judy chose it.
Well, this is going to be a slightly bigger test for you than Morning is Broken. It's titled This Is My Song, but it's really Finlandia. John Sibelius. And it's impossible not to read this and think of the Ukrainian people and keep them in our thoughts. So in your hymnal, it's 159. There are 2 verses, and Joe will play through once to give us a fighting chance.
Let's go ahead and try to stand on this one, see how it feels. We do have a few minutes for discussion. One of the traditions of this congregation is to pose a question and see what's on folks' hearts. What I'm thinking is about patience. I know we have lots of views on Ukraine, but I ask us to just take a moment and frame how the message on patience touched you. What are times you find you are patient? Practices on patience? What are the implications for you? If you have something you'd like to share with the congregation, the mic over there is open, and we'll just take about 5 minutes for this, and then we will extinguish our chalice and have our postlude.
Well, I tend to be rather impulsive and try to, I guess, take things head on. And since I've become a Unitarian Universalist, I've really kind of stepped back a little bit. I continue to be stepping back and looking at that propensity. It's been, I find it's helped quite a bit to be a little more reflective. And thank you.
My problem is deciding between what's being patient and lethargy. So I think I have more patience than I do the inspiration to do things. So,
As Sue was talking, I kept thinking the serenity prayer, the serenity prayer. And that serves me well. The biggest challenge is, and the wisdom to know the difference. Still working on that one.
I have never been a particularly patient person. And so for a number of years, I have done meditation classes. And I try to meditate every morning. And some mornings it's very well. And some mornings I just can't wait to get through it. But I keep practicing. And eventually I'm going to be patient, hopefully before I die.
we go to complete horizontal.
Good morning. The first time I saw Thich Nhat Hanh in person was at Boston University, where I did my philosophy preparation. And my mentor had invited Thich Nhat Hanh to come and speak just during the Vietnam War. And the program that announced he was coming, okay, also indicated the location of where he would be talking. So I went to that place, but there was no one there. And what happened is there were so many people coming, they had to go shift to a larger auditorium. So I came late, and the auditorium doors, they were big, huge, thick wooden doors. You know, I think about 7 or 8 feet tall, and there were 2 of them. So I couldn't just jump right in. I didn't want to throw him off his flow. And I just very gently opened the door, and I even put my hand on the side of the thing where one of the handles were, so it didn't jiggle. And I opened it just enough to kind of put my head in a sense. And he went on and talked for maybe a minute and a half. And he was talking about something very serious. And it was about the Vietnam War, of course. And then he took a pause. Here I am waiting patiently. He took a pause. And I don't know how he became aware of this, but he looked over at the door and he smiled at me and he bowed his head, and the smile, it was like a beam of radiant love. And I'll never forget that. And then later, I found out that he was staying with my mentor for four days up at my mentor's house. Robert Cohen was his name. Anyway, I'll never forget that that experience. And actually, it comes this Wednesday. I've been doing a WCO course on Buddhism, and we're going to do readings on Thich Nhat Hanh about conscious breathing and all of that. And I can put on, and maybe I can put on the website, the UUCR website, the readings. I think there are 6 pages. If I can do that, I'll see if I can arrange that. Well, that's my story.
Was there anybody online? I'm not sure we have those. Is anybody in the saying they wanted to have anything, John, in the discussion?
I don't see anybody making a motion.
Thank you. So now we're going to offer our closing words, and then Jen and I will do the extinguishing the chalice words after my closing words. And then Joe, as he's asked them the timing, as we do the extinguishing the chalice, we'll then do go lift it up, and then might hear a little postlude as we exit. Words from Eric Williams. My friends, may the spirit of love be a living flame before you, a guiding star above you, a firm path below you, and a gentle presence behind you. Go in peace, go in love, go knowing love surrounds you wherever you may go. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again. Whatever you're feeling, Joe, go. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Jim and John